Hey everybody, once again welcome to Welch's Math class. Today I want to spend a little bit of time with you talking about adding and subtracting signed numbers. Personally, I don't really like that terminology of adding and subtracting signed numbers, so I think what I want to do is actually give that another name, if that's okay with you guys. What I'd like to refer to this as instead is combining signed numbers. Okay, so we're going to talk about combining signed numbers, and actually we combine signed numbers by adding and subtracting those numbers. So adding and subtracting are the operations we do, but really what we're doing is combining these numbers together. Before we actually talk about the combining of the signed numbers, the first thing I want to emphasize is that anytime we're working with these problems and we see parentheses in the problems, we need to particularly deal with parentheses before we start trying to do our combining. And so, for example, if we were to have a 5 plus a negative 3, a 5 plus a negative 3. Before we start trying to combine those numbers, what I'd really like to do is notice that we have a plus, minus with a parenthesis there. Opposite signs, plus, minus here with parentheses. The parentheses can be removed if we'll take the plus, minus and consolidate that into a minus. In a sense, it's like taking a positive sign times a negative sign and we get a negative sign. It actually follows the same rules as multiplication with signed numbers. So we can consolidate this, what I call double sign, into a single sign of a minus or a negative sign. We can bring down to 5, bring down to 3, and of course our answer there is 2. So when we see a double sign, a parenthesis with a double sign like that, and the double signs are opposite one another, we just simply want to make those two opposite signs into a single negative sign. Now we can do the same thing when we have parentheses. So if we have something like 7 minus negative 2, okay, so same sort of situation, we have the parentheses, and this time instead of a plus minus, we have a minus minus, or two negative signs right here, all right, and the parentheses. So to consolidate these two, since these two signs are the same, they consolidate into a positive or plus sign, and so we have a 7 and a positive 2, which of course is 9. So anytime I see parentheses in a problem with a situation with a plus minus or a minus minus, I want to consolidate that into a single sign before I go into the combining pieces of the problem. And so what we're looking at there is eliminating double signs. Okay, so let's make ourselves a note of that. We want to eliminate double signs before combining our numbers. In other words, it's this idea of dropping parentheses. So what we have is if we have again a positive and then a minus in a parenthesis, that becomes a straight up minus, or if we have a minus in a parenthesis and a negative in a parenthesis, that becomes a straight up plus. And so these are the kinds of things we want to do before we actually get into the business of combining the signed numbers, before we get into adding and subtracting those numbers. Take a minute if you need to pause the video and copy that info down. I'm moving on. I'm going to give you a quick problem to do yourself, a couple quick problems to do. So let's say you have 9 minus negative 4. We'll give you another one. How about 12 plus negative 8? Okay, so pause the video real quick, do those two problems, we'll come back and then work them together. Okay, glad to have you back. I hope you've worked through those, got those squared away. Let's take a quick look. Right here we have the parentheses, double signs that are the same, become a plus, so we have a 9 plus 4, and we get a 13. Okay, now over here, double signs and parentheses that are opposite one another become a negative or a minus. Bring that down, and we get a 4 for our answer. Ooh, that's an ugly 4, so let's rewrite that 4. Okay, so good deal. So we want to make sure that we can do that before we get into combining. Now, let's talk about combining. When we have a problem without parentheses, now we're going to get into the straight combining or adding and subtracting the signed numbers. When we have a problem, let's say like a negative 3 and then a minus 4. I like to read that the way I work through these problems. I really like to read that negative 4 combined with negative 3. So, in other words, what I say I have here, guys, is I have 3 negatives and 4 more negatives. 3 negatives and 4 more negatives. If I were to draw that out in a picture, it would be 1, 2, 3 negatives and 1, 2, 3, 4 more negatives. So altogether, when I combine these, 7 negatives. 7 negatives. Okay? So I think I get in trouble when I use the word minus here, honestly. If I were to say here negative 3 minus 4 and get any kind of a 1 out of that, okay, thinking of subtracting, that gets me in trouble. But when I, in my own mind, think through here, oh, what this really means is 3 negatives and 4 more negatives, okay? So just take all those negative signs, the 3 and the 4 more, pull them all together, and I end up with 7 negatives, okay? Now let's show you how that works when the signs are opposite one another. So this time, let's take a negative 7 and a positive 4. Negative 7 and a positive 4. Notice the way I said that. I didn't say negative 7 plus 4. I said, because that plus, that word plus would mess me up. I would like to say this, negative 7 combined with positive 4. Now, from a picture standpoint, it looks like this. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 negatives. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 positives. Now, every time you have a positive and a negative that offset each other in this situation, they can truly just do that. They offset each other. So the net result, okay, is 3 negatives. So if I take 7 negatives and 4 positives and put those together, what I'll end up with are 3 negatives. I've got 3 more negatives in this situation than I do positives. I think that's fairly straightforward to see, and hopefully that helps you get a picture of how to combine these. Let's give you a couple of problems to do. You can pause the video, and then we'll come back and look at these together. So this time we've got, we'll say negative 4, negative 6. And the other one I want you to do would be, let's say, a positive 8, and this time a negative 2. Positive 8 and a negative 2. So if you'll pause the video, jump into those problems and do those, we'll be right back and do them together. Hey, welcome back. Good to see you back. Let's take a quick look at these right here together. If we read this problem, look at it, we've got 4 negatives and 6 more negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we count them all up together, we end up with 10 negatives. From a rule standpoint, you might hear the rule here that you would add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay? That's a different approach to it, but that's something that works as well. On this problem, what I hope you did is you saw you had 8 positives and 2 negatives, and you had the offset right there, and you'll end up with 6 positives in the end. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking a set of 8 positives, a set of 2 negatives. You're seeing that I've got more positives than I do negatives, and you want to know how many more. That's all you really want to know. How many more positives do I have here than negatives? Another example I think that will be helpful to you in all of this would be when we have a string of numbers. If we have -3, +7, -8, -2, +4, let's say 6, positive, let's go 5. All right, so we've got this string of numbers. Now, if we look at this as combining these numbers, what we can easily do is set up a little T account if we need to with some positives and negatives. Well, when we look right here, what I hope you notice is we have 7 positives, we have 4 more positives, and then we have 5 positives. So altogether what we have there looks like 16 of the positives. And then the negatives, we have 3, we have 8, we have 2, and we have 6. 3, 8, 2, 6. So it looks like we've got 19 of the negatives. So essentially what we have, 16 positives, 19 negatives, we have 3 more negatives than we do positives. And so that's a quick, easy way to deal with a problem like that. All right? Capture that in your notes, and I'm going to move on. I want to show you another one that's similar to that throws in another idea that we talked about a little earlier. So this time we're going to take -8 plus -3 minus -4 plus -11 minus -9. All right, so this time we've got all these parentheses mixed into this problem, and we want to handle this problem first by eliminating the parentheses before we combine the positives and negatives. So my first bit, remember what we said earlier, parentheses with opposite signs become a negative, parentheses with same signs become a positive, opposites become a negative, sames become a positive. So we've got here a -8, bring down this 3, bring down this 4, bring down this 11, bring down this 9. And so now we've eliminated the parentheses and we can combine the sign numbers. So we don't even have to draw our T account. Really, we can just run through here and look for and add up all our negative numbers, 8, 3, and 11. That's going to be 22 negatives. And then our positives, we got 4 and 9. We put those together. That's 13 positives. Pretty cool, huh? So altogether, what we end up with here are actually 9 more negatives than positives. So just a kind of a combination of everything we've done today. And in this conversation, let's have you do one like this very quickly. So you've got -3, -4 plus -8 minus -9. All right, pause the video, do that, and come back with me. Oh, you're back already. Cool. Let's get together and do this. Hopefully what you did right here was a plus, -3. Okay, and then this right here became, whoa, that's a 4. Getting too fast for myself. That's 8. And that right there is that. So let me double check myself. We got a -3, got a positive here, got a negative here, got a positive here. Now, cool, good stuff. All right, so let's take our 2 negative numbers and add those together. That'll get us 11 negatives. Hope that's what you got. And looks like we got 13 positives. 13 positives. How many more positives do we have than negatives? Well, it looks like we've got 2 more positives than negatives. Hey, that's all we got time for right now. Hope you guys caught that really, really well, and do well on your sign numbers. I'll see you next time.